Council, do you have a program list for me?
I don't believe we have a pronoun.
This is the one, this is the one.
Oh, it is. I didn't, sorry, my bad.
Okay, I can just go through that.
Okay.
All right, so for Gabby Gray.
You hear me wrong.
For Ashmore,
He, they, Your Honor.
what is the honorific you prefer?
Mr.
For Everhart
She, her, Your Honor.
and the doctor? Or what is your honorific?
Yes.
And for Chuck?
She, her as well, with the honorific of Professor, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Council, you may be seated in just a minute. We'll get started. Council, go ahead and get started. Preliminary matters,
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to make appearances for the record.
please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Pranay Mamal, alongside my co-counsel, Ms. Fiona Liu,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
and Ms. Brooke Jones.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
We represent the plaintiff in today's trial. Today, the plaintiff will be calling two witnesses, Mr. Gabby Gray
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
and Ms. Emery Everhart.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Would you like to hear appearances from the defense before we proceed?
Please. Thank you, Council.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Neha Das, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Dylan Pettimore.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
And today we are representing the defendant in today's case, Legacy Family Carnival. Today, we will be calling two witnesses to the stand. First, Mr. Angel Ashmore,
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
and second, Miss or Professor Tempesta Trapp. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Is that it for the appearances from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Council, you may just.
Yes, Your Honor. First, we'd like to move to invoke Rules 603 and 615, the constructive swearing in and sequestration of all witnesses.
Any objection, Council?
No, Your Honor.
So ordered.
Next, Your Honor, we'd like to direct your attention to the motions eliminated today. There's a binder over there that we can,
Thank you, Council.
and it'll just be on the first page.
Go ahead.
We'd like to direct your attention to the first ruling in the motions eliminate, specifically on vicarious liability. What this ruling essentially says is that three witnesses, Angel Ashmore, Legacy Lambert, and Nick Snap, are liable and their actions and omissions are attributable to the defendant in today's trial.
Thank you, Council. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to inquire as to your preferences about movement in the well. Would you like us to ask permission before approaching Your Honor and opposing witnesses?
Council, I'm just going to give blanket permission for movement about the well as for the witnesses when they come.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed to opening statements.
Thank you, Council. Defense, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor, we'd just like to direct your attention to the pretrial orders, specifically pretrial order number 6, which would be on the third page. Now, pretrial order number 6 lays out that as the defense, we have the liberty to pursue an affirmative defense of assumption of risk. But it also articulates that we do not have to concede recklessness, and we will not be doing so. So we will be pursuing recklessness as well as the affirmative defense.
Thank you, Council. Anything further from either party for preliminary matters?
No, Your Honor, nothing further.
Thank you. Plaintiff, opening statements.
Yes, Your Honor. May I please the court?
Go ahead.
The defendant took a risk. And that took a life. It's the summer of 2020. And a magician is performing his final show at a world famous carnival. The magician, Maximilian, steps center stage. And he looks out. into the audience. The crowd is roaring. They're cheering, they're chanting his name. So when the time comes for the magician, Max, to perform his final trick, he smiles. He stands a little straighter. He straightens his tie, and he raises his arms to cue his assistant. You'll learn he cued his assistant to shoot at him. To shoot a blank bullet for the grand finale. The gun goes off. The crowd inhales. They wait in silence for that finale. They're waiting for Max to stand up, to hold up the fake bullet, to smile, to bow, to laugh. But in that moment, it never comes. Because instead of taking a bow to end his show that night, Max is laying in a pool of his own blood. Because that bullet catch, it just ended his life. Now that's why we're here today. Because you'll learn that the defendant in this case, the carnival that Max was working for, well, they promised to make that bullet catch safe. You'll learn that one of the defendant's employees, someone referred to as a prop master, well, that was just her job. That prop master didn't do that job. That's why we're bringing forth a claim of recklessness. Now, all that means is that we have to prove two things to you today. First, that the defendant acted with a reckless disregard for Mr. Maximilian's life. And second, that because of that recklessness, Mr. Maximilian died. Now, to do that, we're going to answer two questions today. What risks did the defendant take? And why were those risks dangerous? Now, to start, you're going to hear from Mr. Gabby Gray. He was the magician's assistant that night. He's going to tell you exactly what risks the defendant took. Because you'll hear from Mr. Gray that Max told the defendant this trick was so dangerous that he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. You learn the defendant, he wouldn't take no for an answer. But you'll learn the defendant promised Max that he would get every single safety measure possible for this trip. You'll learn he promised Max he would buy him a brand new gun. Yeah, the defendant broke that promise. Next, you're going to hear from Emery Everhart. She's an expert in firearm safety, and she's going to tell you why that was so dangerous. Because she'll tell you that the defendant purchased a used gun. She'll explain that used guns can cause something called a misfire. That misfire, it can be deadly. She'll tell you that it was the prop master's job to make sure that Max understood those risks. But we're going to hear in the weeks leading up to the bullet catch, the prop master didn't practice that trick with Max a single time. Learn failed to keep Max safe. Throughout trial today, you're going to hear about how the defendant took risk after risk, and that those risks, it took a life. So at the end of today's trial, we'll ask that you find the defendant life.
Defense open, please.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Whenever you're ready.
On July 14, 2023, a man named Max Maximilian took a risk. he decided to have someone stand 30 feet away from him, point a gun at his head, and pull the trigger. And members of the jury, on that day, Mr. Maximilian died doing what he loved to do more than anything, entertaining hundreds of people. You see, we agree with the plaintiff in this case. What happened to Mr. Maximilian was tragic. That day, something went wrong with the gun, a blank misfired, and we wish that it didn't. But where we disagree is whether the Lampert family carnival was responsible. Members of the jury, today the evidence is going to show throughout this trial that the Lampert family carnival was careful. They took precautions. Now, before we go any further, I just want to talk about how the law actually works in this case. You see, the plaintiff, they have the first burden of proof. They have to prove to you today by a preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely than not true that the Lampert family carnival acted with a reckless disregard for Mr. Maximilian's safety and that he died because of it. They're not going to be able to meet that burden today. But even if they do, we've actually taken on a burden of our own. We're pursuing what's called an affirmative defense, an assumption of risk. All that means is that if we can prove more likely than not that Mr. Maximilian both understood the dangers associated with that magic trick and performed it anyways, you can't find the Lampert family carnival liable for his death. Now, from the defense, you're going to hear from two witnesses today. The first is the prop master that worked at that carnival. He's the man that was in charge of making sure that gun was maintained. He's going to testify as to all the precautions he took before that performance. He'll tell you that he cleaned the gun. He stored that gun somewhere safely. He'll tell you that on July 14th, just moments before that magician got up on stage, he test fired that gun and found absolutely nothing wrong. And you're also going to hear from an expert, somebody who's done extensive research into this particular magic trick. She's going to tell you about just how dangerous it really is. Members of the jury, she'll tell you that even under the most certain circumstances, when every single precaution has been taken to minimize that risk level, something can still go wrong. She'll tell you that there's evidence that that's exactly what happened in this case, that the Lampert family carnival followed those industry standards. She's also going to tell you that Mr. Maximilian knew about that risk and decided to perform that magic trick anyways. Now, members of the jury, no matter what happens during this trial, nothing's going to undo what happened on July 14th, 2023. But what the facts are going to show is that the Lampert family carnival took precautions. And Mr. Maximilian took a risk. That's why we'll ask you at the end of this trial to find him not lying. Thank you.
Your Honor, before the plaintiff calls her first witness, permission to rearrange. Thank you.
The plaintiff call our first witness. Yes. The plaintiff calls Gabby Ray now.
Mr. Ray, please come down. You have already been sworn in.
Yes, Your Honor.
And counsel, you may proceed when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Sure. Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabriel Gray.
Where are you from, Mr. Gray?
I'm originally from Carrollton, Georgia. It's a small town about an hour outside Atlanta. I grew up on my grandparents' wheat and rye farm, but I knew pretty quickly that farming wasn't the life for me. So as soon as I got to college, I moved away.
What do you do for a living now?
Now I'm a magician's assistant. I always dreamed of doing magic myself, but my grandparents said that the only thing I could really make disappear was their peach cobbler, so I sort of set out to prove them wrong. I figured I'd start with the assistant job, kind of learn the ropes, and then move on.
I want to talk about why you're here today. Are you familiar with someone named Maximilian?
Yeah.
How'd you know him?
I was Max's assistant. If you can believe it, we met in Paris. Max was doing one of his shows, and I was the audience volunteer assistant. When he called me up, Max and I just, I never met anyone like him before. We got coffee after the trip, and he asked me to be his real life assistant, and I real life said yes.
Mr. Wright, was your relationship with Mr. Maximilian strictly professional?
No. Max and I, we practically lived together for about 3 years, and somewhere along the way, I fell in love. I mean, he was always so passionate, caring, and driven. I thought he felt the same way about me, so a couple years in, I proposed. He said no, said that we were better as partners. And, I heard at the time, but after a couple of shots of tequila and a couple nights of sleep, I made my peace. As long as he was in my life. It was perfect.
Sir, is he still in your life?
No. On July 14th, 2023, Max died performing his finals.
How did he die?
Gunshot.
Were you there when he was shot?
Of course. I'm the one that shot.
Well, hold on, Mr. Gray. I want to take a step back. How did you end up shooting a gun at your partner?
Legacy Lamp, the owner of the carnival. He wanted us to perform this stupid bullet catch trick. It's something where, point a gun at Max and fire blank, and, Max pulls the bullet out of his mouth and, makes like he caught it.
Objection, lack of foundation, if I may, Your Honor. Go ahead. Your Honor, this witness just testified that Legacy Lampert wanted Gabby Gray and Max to perform this bullet catch trick. We've heard no foundation of how this witness would know the desires of Legacy Lampert. I asked that foundation be laid, whether that's a conversation that would indicate that, or any other foundation before that comes onto the record. Yes, Your Honor, I believe the witness said that Legacy Lampert told them that he wanted them to do this trick. That's the foundation that's already been entered onto the record.
I'm gonna overrule on this ground.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lampert, or Mr. Gray, do you know why the defendant wanted you to do that bullet catch trick?
I mean, he told us the fairground owners were going to terminate his lease unless he drummed up business. His solution to that was having us do the bullet catch trick. Max and I talked about it. We weren't comfortable. We told him so.
What did the defendant say when you told him you weren't comfortable?
Legacy made a lot of promises. He told us that he would keep us safe. He would get us everything we needed for safety. He told us he'd get us a brand new, well-cleaned gun, some blanks, and give us enough time to practice.
I'm going to talk about if the defendant kept those promises. Did he get you what you needed?
No. I mean, a couple of days later, the prop master comes up to us and they hand us this old beat-up gun. That's where the blanks were, and every day he just kept saying delay.
I went to like,
Objection to speculation, if I may. This witness just testified that the gun was old and beat up. It's purely speculation for this witness to testify to the age and state of the gun. And if they are to do so, I ask that foundation be laid in terms of what the gun might have looked like, why this witness might have thought that it was beat up. But without that foundation, it's speculation on the part of the witness to testify to the age of the gun.
Council, go ahead and lay the foundation on a couple questions.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Gray, how did you know that that gun was open?
when I looked, oh, joints didn't work. It made weird sounds. I mean, it was a little dusty.
So what did you do?
I mean, I went to Legacy. I said, we can't do this. We need enough time to practice.
How did the defendant respond?
I don't know what it was. Legacy just came up to me and started yelling in my face. He said if I ever talked about cutting the trick again, he would sue us for breach of contract and he would personally ruin mine and Max's lives. Max and I couldn't afford a lawsuit. We had a career thing. Dropped.
Mr. Gray, I know this might be hard for you, but I want to walk through exactly what happened the night of the bullet catch.
Okay.
How did the show start?
Well, we drew a great big crowd. Figured Legacy would be happy about that. We went through the motions of the other tricks, and it was time for the bullet catch.
Walk us through what happened.
Well, I did what I was supposed to do. Pulled out the gun. I stayed stupid fake fight. That was part of the trick. I pointed the gun at Max, and then I.
What happened when you pulled that trigger?
The gun went off. Now the funny thing is, I'm supposed to turn to the audience and smile. Max's supposed to get up, but instead of laughter and surprise, he all started screaming. I turned back to Max. All I saw was blood. Blood everywhere.
What did you do?
Nothing. I didn't know what to do. Max was everything to me, and I was Max's assistant. He trusted me to be at his side. He trusted me to point that gun at him. Nothing was supposed to go wrong because everything was supposed to be safe.
Great. Why did you pull that trigger?
Because we trusted Legacy. We trusted him. He told us that everything was safe. But I'm the one. I pulled the trigger. I'm gonna have to live with that for the rest of my day.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to proceed? Yes. Mr. Gray, I can tell that this is probably extremely difficult for you. So if you ever need a moment, please just let me know, all right?
It's okay, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Ms. Doss.
It's nice to meet you.
First, I want to talk about something that you said on direct examination that I wanted to correct. You said that the joints of the gun didn't work. You said that correct?
I mean, they weren't exactly up to scratch.
Permission to approach the witness and opposing counsel with this witness's sworn affidavit. That's your witness statement, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You recognize your signature on the back of it?
That's right.
And when you gave this affidavit, you promised to tell the truth and nothing but the truth,
That's right, ma'am. That's what I did.
and to include all relevant data. Nowhere in that entire witness statement do you mention the joints of the gun being messed up.
That's not true, ma'am. I don't mention the joint specifically, but I go on in pretty big detail that the gun is old and didn't work properly.
I understand that, but I'm asking specifically about the joints and mechanisms of the gun. And nowhere in that statement do you even discuss the joints of the gun.
I didn't say the word joints, ma'am. No, but again, I'm pretty clear that the gun didn't work.
Objection, Your Honor, the hearsay be an improper impeachment, if I may be heard. Your Honor, as this witness explained, they go on at length about the specifics of the gun, how they knew that the gun was old, the specifics that they observed about the gun within this affidavit, to bring these statements onto the record when there's not a direct contradiction with the statement. It's hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor? Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, it's my belief that nowhere in this witness statement does this witness mention that the gun doesn't work. Nowhere in this witness statement does it say that. And I think there's a big distinction between the joints of the gun, such as the mechanisms of the gun not working, and the gun being quote unquote old. For this witness to testify on direct examination that the joints specifically were beat up and not working, and have that not be in this witness's affidavit, is a direct contradiction. It should have been mentioned, as it is irrelevant detail for the defense to know that the joints of the gun didn't work, if that is Gabby Gray's intention.
Brief response on those grounds, Your Honor?
I'm gonna overrule the objection, and the issue can be raised later on in counsel in closing arguments.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Gray, you can set that aside. Now, it's true that you and Max were independent contractors for LFC, right?
That's right, yes. We had our own business.
You agreed to perform acts at LFC, right?
That's right.
And you signed a contract agreeing to them,
Yes, we did.
and no one forced you to do that.
No, ma'am.
To your knowledge, no one forced Max to do that.
No, ma'am. We approached Legacy. We signed the contract.
Now, originally, these acts included things like sawing you in half.
That's correct. It was an actual saw in half, but we made it look
Right. Another trick is Max escaping from a water tank tied down by metal chains.
sure. Yeah. Like you eating a lot growing up. You wanted to do the same thing?
You'd agree. Those two tricks are pretty dangerous.
Objection, Your Honor, under Rule 404 to improper character evidence, if I may be heard. Opposing counsel is using these previous tricks to elicit a character trait of being reckless or wanting to do dangerous tricks. These are previous instances being used to show propensity, that because Max acted in that way before, that he would do so in this case.
Response?
Your Honor, I don't believe I'm trying to show propensity in this case. I'm simply laying foundation for how this witness and Max came to actually accepting the bullet catch trick. I'm trying to establish that their arrangement with LFC was of their own free will. I'm talking about the contract in general. So in that sense, it's not being used for propensity.
Based on that offer of proof, I'm gonna overrule your objection. However, you may raise it if it goes into the territory that you would.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
But you'd agree that those tricks are pretty dangerous, right?
Sure, ma'am. The thing about magic is that it's not real. Max and I, we can't do everything. For the sawing in half trick, we have people there maintaining the saw to make sure it's not actually sharp. For the water trick, we have people standing by to cut the rope.
Mr. Gray, I'm just gonna have you answer my question, and you agree that they're dangerous, right?
Sure, ma'am, they can be if you don't have the proper support.
Despite that already risky trick, Max told you he wanted something even more spontaneous.
Sure, if you wanted to do something spontaneous. That's something you-
So it was Maximilian that originally brought up the bullet catch trick.
Sure, we considered about 20 other tricks.
Right? It wasn't Legacy Lampert who originally brought that up, right?
That's not true.
Well, to be clear, it was Maximilian who originally brought up the idea of the bullet catch trick.
To me, yes. And then Legacy asked us what other tricks we had. He told us he wanted us to do bullet catch.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about what the bullet catch trick entails. First, it entails pointing a gun directly at the magician, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Meaning if I drew a line from the barrel of the gun forward, it would land right on Max's head, right?
I believe that is what directly is.
And despite knowing this, you know that pointing a gun directly at someone is dangerous.
That's right, ma'am. That's why the gun and everything in it need to be perfectly maintained.
And Maximilian, well, he knew that too.
Sure.
And in the bullet catch trick, there's no projectile, right?
No, ma'am. There's not supposed to be. It's a blank.
Right. But even though there's a blank, there is a burst of gas that comes directly out of the gun, right?
That's correct.
And that burst of gas is dangerous.
Sure.
Despite that, on July 14th, you and Max got up on that stage and you pointed that gun directly at him.
We didn't have much choice, ma'am.
Well, let's talk about that. I want to talk about how this trick ended up in your final show. Now, on June 28th, Legacy Lampert called you in for a meeting, right?
That's true. He did.
And he asked you about different types of tricks you and Max could perform.
Sure. Like I said before, we rattled off a few. When we got to the bullet catch, Legacy was very clear that's the one he wanted us to do.
Well, let's talk about that. It was you two who brought up the bullet catch when he asked about performance trick ideas.
Not specifically, ma'am. It was in a list of all the other tricks.
It was in a list, but it was you that was saying that list.
Sure.
So you'd agree you brought up the bullet catch trick.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered. The witness has already answered the question before and again right now.
Sustained.
Now, I want to talk a bit about the gun. You're familiar with Angel Ashmore,
I am.
and you're familiar with how the gun is stored.
That's correct.
So you knew the gun was stored in a lockbox, right?
That's right.
And only two people had the key to that.
That's correct. Me and Angel.
You and Angel, correct? And in your time working at LFC, you didn't see anybody else with that gun.
Oh, ma'am, I barely saw the gun myself.
You didn't see anybody take unauthorized shots.
No, ma'am.
You didn't see that gun just lying around.
Oh, ma'am, again, like I said, I barely saw that gun. That was part of the problem.
To your knowledge, that gun was properly secured in its time at LFC.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
And this is the same objection, Council, to develop your line of questioning more for that.
Yes, Your Honor. Well, you'll agree that you never saw it not in the lockbox when it wasn't supposed.
Sure, I never saw it outside the lockbox except for me.
I want to talk about why you might be here today.
Because Max died.
You loved Max, didn't you?
That's right.
And today you're testifying on behalf of the
I was called in. That's true.
and you know that if plaintiff prevails in today's case, someone will be found liable for the death of the loved one.
That's correct, ma'am. Legacy Karma.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Council.
Please, now.
Mr. Gray, you were just asked some questions about who brought up the bullet catch, but I want to be perfectly clear. Whose decision was it to perform that trick?
Legacy's through and through, ma'am. We brought it up, sure, in a list of things, but as soon as we said the words bullet catch, Legacy's eyes lit up. He said, "That's the one I want you to perform. I'll sue you if you don't perform."
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Council. Mr. Gray, you're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Angel Ashmore to the stand.
Mr. Ashmore, please make your way to the witness stand, and I remind you, you have already been sworn.
Yes, Your Honor.
And counsel, you may proceed with your questions whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's all right if I bring this back over.
Yes. Good morning. Could you introduce yourself to the court?
Hi,
My name's Angel Ashmore.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Ashmore?
Well, I'm the prop master at Legacy Family Carnival, or LFC. Basically, that just means I'm in charge of maintaining, purchasing, anything to do with props at LFC.
How did you get into that line of work?
I'd like to say I had some ambition, but it was all Maximilian. In 2018, I happened to catch one of his shows and I was hooked. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I've loved the carnival, but performers like Max, they draw you in this special way. I've always wanted to be a performer, get on stage, but I've just been too shy. So I've been working behind the scenes ever since.
How did you come to learn that Maximilian would be performing at LFC?
Well, Legacy informed me that Max would be performing for LFC. I was ecstatic. I mean, I'd have the chance to see my idol again. Max is just one of those special type of people that can make you feel good and special, even if you're feeling down on yourself. So I was nothing but excited to have a chance to see my idol again.
What work did you do in relation to Max's act?
Well, as prop manager, I was in charge of all props involved in any of Max's acts, whether that be hoops, a water tank, but particularly for that final show on July 14th, I was also in charge of those props.
And what props were required for the final show?
Well, the final show, it included a particular trick, the bullet catch. It's a kind of sleight of hand trick where the assistant, Gabby Gray, would point a gun directly at Max, shoot off a blank, and Max would feign as if he caught the bullet in his mouth. The actual props that were needed for that were a gun and some blanks, particularly a Glock 22. I'd gotten those at a local gun club.
You mentioned a gun. Do you have experience in the maintenance of firearms on set?
Of course, as anyone knows, firearms, they can be dangerous. So the National Carnival Association, they have a 3-hour training seminar that I took part in. It covered everything from maintenance to cleaning to proper storage. That's how I learned how to take care of firearms.
How was the gun stored?
Well, according to the guidelines, guns need to be stored properly under lock and key. So at all times, I had that gun in a lockbox in the prop. Only 2 people had keys for it. Myself and Gabe.
Now, as the person in charge of the props for the bullet catch trick, how did you feel about it being performed?
Objection brought to relevance, if I may be heard. What this specific witness feels about a trick that was being performed does not make any fact in today's case any more or less likely. It's simply irrelevant to the matter discussing.
Pursuant to stipulation 8, in this jurisdiction, all relevance objections have been waived for this specific witness. And because of that, I believe this witness is at liberty to testify as to how they felt about this trick being performed.
Overruled.
Yes, Ron. Could you repeat as to why or what you felt about the bullet catch trick being performed?
Honestly, my heart kind of sunk when I heard that the bullet catch trick was going to be performed by Max. I had my concerns about the dangers involved, and I knew someone had to talk to him. And unfortunately, I realized that someone had to be me. I don't have the best people skills, and obviously Max is such a great performer, but I practiced for a couple days in front of the mirror, making sure I had my introduction and what I was going to say, and I set up a meeting with Max.
And when was this meeting?
July 12th. It was surreal at the time, face to face with Maximilian, Max the Magnificent. And he asked me personally what I thought about it.
What did you say about what you thought?
Well, I mentioned what I said earlier. I was honest with him. was clear, just like I practiced. I let him know how dangerous I thought that trick was.
How did Max react to your discussions of danger?
Max didn't really react at all. He mumbled something under his voice, and I could tell that there was some, reticence to do the trick, but I mentioned that I could call up Legacy, I could figure something out. If
Objection or speculation, if I may be heard. Specifically to the statement that there was some reticence to do the trick. We've heard no foundation as to how this witness would know that, what Mr. Maximilian said, how he was looking. That makes this witness be able to come to that conclusion that he was reticent about doing the trick.
Your Honor, I believe this witness testified that there was some reticence, and the foundation has been laid because this witness is talking about an interaction where they discussed their concerns of the dangers of the trick, and Max was not responding in a way that would push back on that. Because Max wasn't pushing back on it or expressing that he also felt the same way, that foundation is enough for this witness to say that there was some reticence. This witness is not speculating into the mind and saying that there absolutely was some sort of feeling that Max had, but rather based on that interaction that he's testified about extensively, that there was some reticence because there was no pushback here on it.
I'm going to sustain your objection. Counsel, you can ask a couple more clarifying questions if you like on what the witness person.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, when you discussed the dangers, did Max push back at all?
No, he didn't really say anything. I mentioned that if Max did have any issues with the trick, that I could contact Legacy, I could figure something out, we could change the trick, but Max just changed the subject and told me that he had another meeting and I was off. I know I shouldn't have left that day without getting a firm no, but what could I have done? At the end of the day, it was Max's decision.
I want to talk about the night of July 14th. What type of preparation did you do for that act?
Well, that morning in the prop tent, I went to go maintain the gun that was still in the lockbox. I opened it up, I took the gun and the ammo. I cleaned the chamber, I cleaned that gun properly. I opened up that chamber to make sure there weren't any extra ammo that was in the chamber, and I loaded it up with blanks. I took a second to fire some test shots and then made sure to triple check again all of that ammo. And then I placed the lockbox right next to the stage, just like me and Gabe had talked about previously.
Did you notice anything wrong in those test shots?
Not at all. The gun was firing absolutely correctly.
Were you watching Max's final performance?
I wasn't. I was busy doing some other work for Legacy. I knew how the trick was supposed to go, but after the gunshot, something went really wrong.
What do you mean something went wrong?
Well, after the gunshot, screams coming from the main stage. I mean, there should have been no reason for that. So I just jumped into gear. I ran towards the main stage and I saw him.
What did you do?
Saw Max laying there in front of me, covered in a pool of blood. I mean, I couldn't even recognize him. His face was so covered. I ran up to him. I tried to stop the bleeding, but there was blood all over my arms, and I couldn't do anything. He was dying right there in front of me, and I couldn't do anything. He tried to say something to me at the time, but I tried to listen in. Maybe he had something to talk.
You said you tried to say something. Do you understand his words?
I don't think I'll ever forget. He just said, "It hurts. I should have listened." After that, the paramedics came. And Max was dead on arrival.
Thank you, Mr. Ashmore. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Counsel Devon.
Yes, Your Honor. Excellent. Good morning, Mr. Ashmore.
Good morning. I didn't catch your name earlier.
Ms. Jones.
Nice to meet you, Ms. Jones.
It's nice to meet you too. Now, sir, I want to start off right where you left off on direct examination. With that conversation that you said, you heard Mr. Maximilian say those words right before he died, right?
Yes, that's what I heard him say.
You heard him say, I should have listened.
Yeah.
Sir, you spoke with the police before today's trial, right?
That's correct.
You didn't tell the police you heard those words.
I didn't really think anything of those words. He was a dying man. I didn't know what to think of it.
So you didn't tell the police?
No.
You spoke with attorneys before today's trial.
That's correct.
You didn't tell me or Ms. Doss about those words, did you?
No, I did mention that I'd be able to testify about it.
Right, but you never told us what those words were that you heard.
Not in particular.
You wrote a sworn statement in preparation for today's trial, right?
That's correct.
Sir, nowhere in that statement will I find the words, I should have listened.
No. Preparation for trial, obviously there was discussion of my testimony, but I didn't include that in my affidavit. I did say that I'd be able to say those words.
But you didn't include those, 5 words in your affidavit?
Objection to asked and answered.
Response? This is cross-examination. I'm simply trying to get a simple yes from the witness. He hasn't given it yet.
I'm gonna overrule and allow a couple more questions on this.
Yes or no? Mr. Ashmore, yes or no, you didn't include those words that you say you heard in your statement.
I didn't include the exact words.
The first time that any of us are hearing about those supposed words is right now here in court today.
During preparation of trial, I previewed those words, but other than that, no.
So you say you're going to preview those words, you never wrote them down, yes or no?
No, but I discussed them, obviously.
Right, then I want to talk about something else you mentioned on direct examination because you talked about a conversation you had with Mr. Maximilian, right?
That's correct.
You said you were talking about the bullet catch.
That's right.
And you said something interesting, so I wrote it down. He said you heard him mumble something under his breath.
That's correct.
So it's interesting you use the word something because you actually heard what he said.
Not really. I couldn't really make out exactly what he was saying.
Well, you could make out that he was saying something about legacy Lampert.
I think he said the words legacy.
Not just that, you heard him say something about legacy forcing him to do the trick. Yes or no?
That's not true.
So is it not your testimony that you heard him say something about being forced to do the trick?
I heard him say forced to do something, but I don't know exactly what he was talking about.
Right, so to be clear, you heard him say legacy,
Sure.
and then you heard him say something about forced to do the trick.
I heard him say forced to do. I didn't see the word. I didn't hear the word trick.
All right, Mr. Ashmore. But I want to talk about how exactly you started working for the defendant. Because you said that you didn't have much ambition, right?
No, I didn't at the time.
In fact, when the defendant hired you to be their prop manager, you had absolutely zero experience in prop management.
Not at the time, no, but I really wanted to get involved with carnival. People like Max, it makes you want to get involved with things like
You had no degrees in prop management,
that. No,
no certifications.
well, I gained certifications in my time as a prop manager, and I did train for about a year under the previous one.
All right, to be clear, Mr. Ashmore, I'm asking you about when the defendant decided to hire you. And when he decided to hire you, you didn't have any certifications in prop management,
But not at the time of my hiring.
no training in prop management.
Again, not at the time of my hiring.
You certainly didn't have any training handling firearms, did you?
Not at the time of my hiring, although in the next year I did gain that protocol.
Well, if you didn't have that experience in the time of your hiring, let's talk about why the defendant decided to hire you. Sir, you know that.
Objection to improper character evidence, if I may. Your Honor, opposing counsel is using this witness's supposed or alleged character trait of carelessness on prior occasions when he was hired to prove that he was careless or not trained on the day of the incident. This line of questioning is being used for propensity because when he was hired, he was not working on the bullet catch trick that we're discussing here today in trial. So it would be a prohibited use, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 404B2, knowledge is a permissible use of character evidence. We're using this to
show this witness's knowledge, what he knew about training, about firearms when he was hired. We're not using it to show propensity of carelessness, just what he did and didn't know about the things that he was going to be dealing with, like in this case.
I'm going to sustain the objection. This witness has testified that even though at the start he didn't have the knowledge, he did gain it through training as he just testified, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Ashmore, I want to talk about why the defendant hired you. Sir, you know that the defendant, well, they were experiencing budget cuts when you worked there.
Yes, I was aware of that.
So they fired the old prop manager.
Actually, the old prop manager was around retirement age.
They fired the 2 assistant prop managers.
That was later on.
And they hired an unpaid intern instead to manage the props.
Yes, they hired me to shadow the previous prop master. And during that time, I was just training. I wasn't actually working.
That's right, sir. That unpaid intern that they hired was you.
That's correct.
You were willing to work for free for an entire year.
That's correct. I was really passionate about prop management.
And once you started working there for real, well, you noticed they continued to cut the budget.
That's correct.
They cut your salary.
That's true.
Sir, you were stretched thin.
I definitely would say yes. I was.
You admit sometimes you missed maintaining the props.
Once in a while, but I always made sure that props were properly maintained for any sort of act.
Sometimes you put Mr. Maximilian's props on the back burner.
That's true. On occasion, they did fall to the back, but I always made sure to check back in.
I want to talk about what might have happened when you put his props on the back burner. Mr. Ashmore, you were the one who bought the gun that killed Mr. Maximilian, yes or no?
I was.
A Glock 22, right?
Yes.
And you knew when you purchased that gun that it was going to be used for the bullet catch.
That's correct.
So surely you bought a brand new, high quality inspected gun, right?
I didn't buy a new gun. No.
That's right. You didn't buy a new gun because the defendant told you to buy the cheapest gun you could find.
The defendant, Legacy, told me to buy a gun that was secondhand based on the pricing that he gave me.
That's right. He told you to buy a gun that was secondhand, so you went to a gun club.
That's correct.
You went to a gun club and you bought a gun that was about to be decommissioned. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Ashmore, did you ask why that gun was being decommissioned before you put it in Mr. Maximilian's hands?
No. Although I wasn't informed of any sort of dangers with the firearm, I wasn't informed of any sort of issues. They did sell it to me, and knowing what was going to be used.
That's a yes to my question. You never asked why it was being decommissioned. Thank you, Mr. Ashmore. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. May I have a time check as to how much?
30 seconds.
Now, opposing counsel got up here and asked you a lot about the state of the gun. What was the state of the gun based on your test shots just moments before the trip took place?
Before the trip, the gun was working completely correctly. I fired off those test blanks. I loaded the gun correctly. I cleaned it. I made every single precaution I could so that gun could be safe for the trip.
Thank you, Mr. Ashmore. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ashmore, you're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Time people, do we have 5 minutes for recess?
All right, yeah, we have time, sure.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor. Judge, let's stop. I feel like I've had you. Joe, I feel like I've had you.
to see their charm. Lydia's iPad was having an issue.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do we have everybody that we need?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff is all back and ready to proceed.
Thank you, defense.
Bench is ready to go.
All right, so plaintiff is calling next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff calls Miss Emery Everhart to the stand.
Thank you, Ms. Everhart. Please come and take the witness stand. You can sworn in.
Good morning. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning. My name is Emery Everhart.
What do you do for a living, Miss Everhart?
I'm a consultant and an educator in firearm safety. I've been doing it for a while. I was a police officer for 8 years and a firearm trainer for 4.
How'd you get into your field?
Same way my dad did and his dad did. I went into the police force, wanted to make a difference in the world. During my time on the force, I saw just how dangerous firearms can get. So I stepped down and I spent 4 years training police officers on how to handle them more safely.
What kind of education do you have in firearm safety?
I have a bachelor's in criminal justice from Georgia State University. I went to 2 Georgia schools. I got my master's in education from UGA. After that, I took a 6-month course in firearm safety through the police force. And I had to take a 2-week refresher course on it every year that I served.
So how are you involved with this case?
Of course, I was retained by the plaintiff in today's case to testify about the bullet catch trick on July 14th, 2023, specifically whether or not safe firearm practices were used.
You just mentioned something called the bullet catch trick. Is that trick dangerous?
It certainly can be. It can be deadly.
How can the bullet catch become deadly?
Since you're using a real gun in the trick, something called a misfire can happen, and it can be deadly.
Ma'am, what exactly is a misfire?
A misfire is when a gun malfunctions. Basically, any dust or debris that's caught inside the barrel can shoot out just as fast as any bullet. It can kill you.
Then I want to go ahead and shift to your work on this case. How'd you go about your investigation?
I specifically looked into the carnival's prop master, Angel Ashmore.
How'd you investigate the armor?
I used a method that I call the ARM method. Looking into Angel Ashmore, I evaluated their decisions on that day when it came to A, acquiring the gun, R, how they rehearsed with the performers, and M, how they maintained that gun.
Let's walk through that method step by step, starting with that first part, A, acquiring the gun. So how should a prop master acquire a gun for a stunt?
Objection, Your Honor, lacks foundation.
This one further, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, we haven't heard about any sort of standards that this expert has relied on in terms of what standards need to be followed in order to have a reasonable duty of care and follow that duty of care. Your Honor, they need a lay foundation as to what standards this expert is testifying to in order for the jury to understand if the Lambert family carnival met or did not meet those standards.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, this witness has already testified to having extensive knowledge of firearm safety. She's testified to using the ARM method, and that specifically lays out the safety that prop managers should follow. She's testified to that standard of care right now. Furthermore, in this jurisdiction, all 702 objections for experts are overruled.
The response to the second issue, counsel, that the objections are overruled.
Yes, Your Honor, we're not objecting under Rule 702. What we're objecting under is a lack of foundation. We believe that the jury needs to understand that if this expert is just giving her personal understanding of safety as it relates to this method that she chose to use, it's important for them to hear that and understand that. Your Honor, we want to make the distinction for the jury that she's not testifying to the law, what needed to be done, there's any regulations provided by the Carnival Association, just that this is her understanding based on her training.
Your Honor, we're happy to lay that foundation.
Please, thank you, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Everhart, you told us that you used the R method for this case. Why'd you choose that method?
I've testified in trials like this before, and it's a standard way to approach my analysis.
Let's break down that standard. Starting with the first part, acquiring the gun. How exactly should a prop master acquire a gun?
Well, standard procedure is you should always buy a new gun. It's safest, just to keep track of its history of use. If a gun is used extensively, then it's absolutely more likely to misfire. Guns wear and tear just like anything.
What about that second part of your method, rehearsing with performers? How should a prop master rehearse?
It's a prop master's job to oversee every rehearsal with the performers, to take notes and correct any mistakes. But that may not have happened in this case.
Objection, Your Honor. Again, we'd object under a lack of foundation to this line of testimony as to what the prop master's job is. Again, Your Honor, that's not included in the arm method, which relates to firearm safety generally. Your Honor, we need to know what standards they're pulling from to say that the armorer is responsible for doing those performances.
Response?
Now, I'm gonna ask that you, ask the question about where the witness is getting the standard operating procedure, knowledge from.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Everhart, how exactly do you go about conducting what's standard interview?
Of course. So part of my personal experience with firearms has included training with the National Carnival Association. I haven't taken a course with them specifically, but as someone who's very aware of general firearm practices, a lot of the typical standards are just federally the same across a lot of training standards.
So, based on those standards, how should prop masters rehearse with performers?
Of course, a licensed professional like an armorer or a prop master should be present for every rehearsal to give notes and correct the actors on their behavior, just handling the gun as safe as possible.
Finally, you said that prop masters have to maintain guns. How are they supposed to do that?
There's a lot that goes into gun maintenance. You have to take it apart, shine a light for dust and debris, clean it, put it back together. I'm not even scratching the surface here. You should repair any scratches too.
What happens if a prop master doesn't properly maintain a gun?
Improper maintenance leads to a misfire.
Then I want to talk about the prop master in this case. How did the prop master acquire the gun used for the bullet?
Objection, Your Honor, lacks foundation. We haven't heard how she would know anything related to this case. She hasn't testified to what materials she reviewed.
Response? Yes, Your Honor. Now, pursuant to Rule 705, experts are actually permitted to testify to their conclusions without revealing all of the underlying facts and data associated with those conclusions. Ms. Everhart has already associated that she's been retained by the plaintiff to investigate this case. That's enough foundation under Rule 705.
I'm gonna rule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
So, Ms. Everhart, you were just telling us how the prop master acquired the gun in this case.
Of course. Angel Ashmore acquired the gun used from a gun club, and it was about to be decommissioned.
What does it mean for a gun to be decommissioned?
Decommissioned just means the gun's about to be retired. That can be due to wear and tear, anything that could make it potentially dangerous.
Why was the gun in this case about to be decommissioned?
We have no idea.
Why not?
Because Angel Ashmore didn't check. I found that to be highly irresponsible.
What about rehearsal? How did the prop master in this case, how should you rehearse with the performers?
I actually have a demonstration prepared. I think it's best if I show you visually.
Your Honor, permission for Ms. Everhart to step down.
Mr. Monoletti, if I could actually have you stand over where the stand is. Perfect.
So what's so special about rehearsing the bullet catch?
So the bullet catch is special in that you're essentially creating the illusion that you're shooting directly at the performer. So say that Mr. Mamaletti is the magician and I'm the assistant. If we were practicing, it would be intuitive for me to point the gun directly at him, like this. Don't worry, Mr. Mamaletti, it's not loaded. But gun safety makes it very clear that this is not safe and not okay.
Objection, Your Honor. Again, we would object to lack of foundation. The witness is referring generally to gun safety. It's important that the jury understands what standards she's talking about to understand what standards the Lampert Farm Mechanical Carnival had to uphold. We still don't have that foundation on the record. She's speaking too generally like that.
Response? Yes, Your Honor. I believe we've actually heard extensive foundation to the exact standards Ms. Everhart used in her analysis. She's testified to using the R method, that's standard in the industry when analyzing prop managers. And she's also testified to specifically holding that prop manager to the standards made by the National Carnival Association. Certainly, that's enough on the record.
So I'm gonna overrule this.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you were just telling us about how it might be intuitive for performers to know about this trick.
Of course, while it's intuitive to point directly at the performer, carnival safety procedures say that this is not okay. What they should have done is this.
Hold on, what exactly is different here?
So you see the illusion is effectively the same to the audience, but I'm not pointing directly at the magician anymore. If anything were to happen with the gun, it would go right past his head. He would be safe.
Did the prop master in this ever rehearse like that with the performers?
No, Angel Ashmore didn't sit in on a single rehearsal. They reported seeing them rehearse, but never gave any notes to correct their behavior.
How should the prop master have given notes?
So while the prop master should have informed them to perform it like this, instead, they performed the trick the night of like this, pointing directly at the magician.
Thank you. You can return to your seat. I want to talk about that final part of your analysis, maintenance. How did the prop master in this case maintain it?
In short, they didn't. The prop tent was dusty and they reported being too stretched thin to give Max's props any proper care.
So what were your final conclusions in this case?
I concluded that Lampert Family Carnival and their armorer were recklessly treating the gun used in the bullet catch.
Thank you, Ms. Everett. Nothing further.
Thank you, counsel. Right, I'm sorry, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Everhart.
Good morning.
Ma'am, I want to start off by talking about something you addressed on direct examination, all right?
All right.
Ma'am, you told us that you're trained in firearm safety, right?
Yes, sir.
You told us that in this case, you looked into the standards set out by the National Carnival Association. That's what you said?
Well, there are federal standards for firearm safety. Of course, they're nationally regulated. The National Carnival Association is, of course, under their purview.
Ma'am, you said that you are trained under the National Carnival Association standards, right?
No, I said I'm familiar with their standards, but I'm not specifically trained through the National Carnival Association.
Ma'am, you've never trained with the National Carnival Association before, have you?
No, sir.
You haven't taught classes on the standards set out by the National Carnival Association?
No, but I have taught classes in firearm safety through national standards.
Ma'am, you've never taken a class with the National Carnival Association, have you?
No, sir.
All right, ma'am. Well, then let's talk about the bullet catch trick that you reviewed in this case, all right?
All right.
Like you told us, you're familiar with this trick.
I am.
You've seen it performed before.
I have.
Ma'am, you know that when a magician decides to perform the bullet catch trick, they have to use a real gun, right?
They do. And that's why proper maintenance and performance rehearsals are extremely important to ensure safe practices.
Right, ma'am. Those are so important because real guns are dangerous, right?
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, this bullet catch trick in particular, it involves aiming a gun at someone's head and pulling the trigger, right?
Not necessarily. It doesn't always have to be directly at the performer. In fact, the trick rarely requires that you ever point it at them directly.
Ma'am, nevertheless, you'd agree with me that the bullet catch trick is particularly dangerous to perform, right?
Of course it is. That's where instruction during rehearsal is crucial.
Ma'am, there's some steps that a company like the Lambert Family Carnival can take to minimize that risk level, right?
Of course.
Could you tell us what the most crucial step that they can take is?
Maintaining the gun properly.
That's your testimony, maintaining the gun properly?
Pardon me, I don't remember everything that I said in my report necessarily, but maintaining the gun is crucially important as anything else.
If I showed you your report, would it refresh your memory for you, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
I think you have that binder there. Can you just flip to it for me?
Yes, of course.
Just let me know when you're there.
Of course. So a lot of pages in here, sir.
Of course, ma'am.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm looking at line 46. You see what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
Ma'am, you say that by far the most crucial step is hiring a licensed professional whose job it is to minimize those risk levels, right?
Yes, of course.
So the most important step that the Lambert Family Carnival could have taken was having a licensed professional.
Of course, one who knows how to step in and correct behavior during rehearsals. One who knows how to properly maintain a gun and where to get it from.
Well, then let's talk about if they followed that step. Now, the defendant had an armor, right?
They did, yes.
Angel
Ash.
Ashmore.
Yes.
Right, ma'am. Mr. Ashmore, he was trained and certified by the National Carnival Association, right?
He was, yes. And from his affidavit, I recall that he watched a video on 3 times speed, and that was the extent of his training.
He was certified, right?
He was,
He was
yes.
trained on how to clean a gun,
Yes, he did say
how to
that.
store a gun.
Counsel, please allow the witness to finish answering the question before you ask him.
Yes, Your Honor. He was trained on how to store a gun, right?
He did claim that, yes.
And he was trained on NCAA guidelines relating to how to store a gun at that carnival, right?
Yes, I suppose he did.
Ms. Everhart, in your entire analysis, you found no issues with the training that Mr. Ashmore received, right?
That's true. To the extent that I'm not sure what all the training necessarily entailed, I can't see a problem with it.
All right, ma'am, well then let's talk about the precautions that armorer took in this case, okay?
All right.
You'd agree with me that this trick, it happened on July 14th, 2023.
Yes, sir.
The armorer handled the gun that day.
He did.
He
Yes.
cleaned that gun that day.
He did. He said he gave it a quick pass over, but that's not all that maintaining a gun requires.
And he cleaned it, right?
He only cleaned it, yes.
He made sure that the right ammunition was safely loaded into that gun.
He did say that he checked it, yes.
And he test fired that gun.
He did, but what's important about test firing is you're supposed to clean it even after test firing it. And that wasn't present in his testimony.
And he did test fire it, right?
He did.
Man, when he test fired that gun, he didn't find any issues with it, right?
No, the issue would have been after, not maintaining the gun after testing it.
Now, Ms. Everhart, I want to ask you something about what we've heard in trial today, okay? Ma'am, you didn't find any evidence in this case that the joints on that gun were broken, right?
No, I didn't. I did review evidence that there was significant wear and tear on the gun.
But specifically the joints, ma'am, you never saw any evidence they were broken, right?
No, just wear and tear.
Ma'am, if someone knew that the joints on a gun were broken, it'd be important to tell someone, right?
I suppose so, yes.
Ma'am, if the magician's assistant in this case found that joints in the gun were broken, they should probably tell the armorer, right?
Well, I would suppose that they would trust the armorer as a licensed professional to tell them, actually, if anything was wrong with the gun.
Ma'am, you never found any evidence in this case that Mr. Maximilian or his assistants told that armorer that the joints in that gun were broken, right?
No, and I want to make something clear. It's never up to the performers to tell the armorer how to do their job. That's the job of the armorer. to be the licensed expert on set. Performers, as much as they're paid to pretend to know about guns, can never know as much as a licensed professional is tasked with knowing.
So that's a no to my question, ma'am. You never found any evidence that they told anyone about broken joints in a gun, right?
No, it was not their job to report that.
Thank you. Nothing further. Your Honor.
Thank you, and redirect.
Yes, can I get a quick time check?
Got 15 seconds.
No redirect. We asked them, Ms. Everhart, be excused.
Thank you, Ms. Everhart. You are excused. Defense, your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. We call Tempesta trapped to stand.
Professor Trapp, please make your way down to the witness stand, and you are under oath.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Pettimores.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Of course. Good morning. My name is Tempesta Tra.
What do you do for work?
I am an expert on anything and everything related to the management, history, and logistics of performance magic. I'm also a professor at the University of Exeter, and I teach my own classes on the occults and sciences. I also have a consulting firm.
Ma'am, could you just tell us a little bit more about what performance magic is?
I'd love to, Mr. Pettimores. Performance magic is a form of theater centered around illusion. Now, it's been around for thousands of years, which unfortunately also means it has a long history of concerns for safety, concerns which are my job to try and minimize.
Well, how did you get into the performance magic field?
As a little kid, I always loved going to the carnival and watching the magic shows and the big performances, but I just never thought that that could be a career for myself. That was until I started to do consulting work. Since then, it's all changed.
Did you go to school for that line of work?
I did. I got a bachelor's in history with a focus in modern illusion magic. And I also got a master's in anthropology from Case Western, with my thesis being done on the safeties and practicalities of modern magicians.
Well, all right, Professor, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this case.
Of course.
Could you tell us how you're involved?
Sure. I was asked to analyze the bullet catch trick performed by the Lambert family carnival. The same trick that resulted in the death of a performer, Mr. Maximilian.
What sort of materials did you use for that analysis?
I looked at a couple of legal documents from the carnival, and then I also took a look at two written statements, the first from the prop master and the second from the magician's assistant.
Did you use any sort of method in your analysis?
I did. I used the teller method.
How does the teller method work?
The teller method is a way to assess the risk of a magic trick. It takes two things into account. The first one being the history, and the second one being the level of safety associated with that specific performance.
Well, Professor, you said you were using that method to analyze the bullet catch trick.
Right.
Are you familiar with that trick?
I am. I've done intensive research on it, and I performed it myself one time.
Is that trick safe to perform?
Although it is legal and magicians still perform it, I would have to advise my clients to stay away from the trick because of its danger.
Why do you advise your clients on it?
Even if the gun isn't supposed to fire any bullets, it's important to remember that it's still a real weapon being used for a performance. And anytime you have those two factors interacting, there's a possibility that something could go wrong, even if you have the perfect circumstances.
Well, has anyone died performing this trick before Mr. Maximilian?
Unfortunately, yes. Many magicians have passed away as a result of the bullet catch trick, and many more have been injured because of it.
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance that may be heard.
Go ahead, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor, if I could direct your attention to the case law, it's precedent Uchida v. Gill. Now, this precedent states that any evidence of a trick being dangerous or of circumstances being dangerous is only relevant in this case for the defense's assumption of risk if it can be proven that the plaintiff, Maximilian, actually was aware of those risks. So for them to now have a witness testify towards this trick having caused many deaths in the past, that fact is only relevant if they can tie it back to Max specifically knowing it. It's our contention they won't be able to tie those two things together.
Brief response.
Yes, Your Honor, we believe this is going directly to the burden that we've taken on for an assumption of risk. That because there's been magicians in the past that have died performing this trick, Mr. Maximilian would have understood and known that it could be dangerous. Your Honor, we're going to get into that throughout this direct examination.
Respond?
I'm gonna allow the questions right now. However, if what you're asking for is not sought out in questions, you are free to explore it on cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you told us that magicians have died before performing this trick. Did you find any evidence that Mr. Maximilian was aware of the danger associated with the bullet catch trick?
Any magician that's going to perform this trick should make sure to look it up. That's a standard procedure. Any magician should know how to do that.
Well, ma'am, because of the danger associated with that magic trick, are there any steps that a company like the Lamper Family Carnival can take to minimize those risks?
Of course, there's always a handful of precautions that any company can take to ensure that their performers have the best odds at a safe performance.
Let's talk about some of the precautions that the Lamper Family Carnival may or may not have taken. Ma'am, where was the gun stored?
It was stored in a locked box.
Who had keys to that locked box?
Only two people, the assistant for the magician and the prop master.
What about cleaning? Was the gun clean before it was used?
It was. It was actually cleaned on the day of the incident, July 14th, 2023.
Well, did that prop master test fire that gun before handing it to Mr. Maximilian?
He did. He test fired it with no incident on that exact same day.
Did the prop master make sure the right ammunition was loaded?
Yes. He claims that he was able to triple check to make sure that that gun was loaded with the correct bullets, the blank ammo.
Well, ma'am, if all of those precautions were taken by the Lamper Family Carnival, how could have that gun killed Mr. Maximilian?
Mr. Pettimores, even if a gun is cleaned, maintained, perfect, there's always the possibility that it can fire out debris, and that within itself can be deadly, just as deadly as a bullet.
Now, Professor, we've talked a lot about what the Lamper Family Carnival did to make sure this trick was safe.
Sure.
Is there anything that a magician is supposed to do to make sure that trick is safe?
Of course, a magician should always go back and double check the prop master's work to ensure that that gun or props have been cleaned, maintained, and most importantly, kept away from live ammunition.
Do you know if Mr. Maximilian took any of those steps?
No, based on the things I reviewed, I found little evidence that he did.
All right, Professor, based on all the evidence you reviewed in this case, what was your ultimate conclusion?
Ultimately, I found that the Lamper Family Carnival generally maintained the gun, and that the likely possibility for Mr. Maximilian's death is that that gun misfired, that somehow something went wrong, despite the carnival's best efforts to keep that performance as safe as possible.
Thanks, Professor.
Of course, Mr. Pettimores.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning, Counselor.
I want to jump in right where you left off,
Sure, of course.
because you just told us that it was your conclusion that Max probably knew the risks of this trip.
No, ma'am, that's wrong.
Ma'am, you were telling us he should have known the risks, right?
Well, my ultimate conclusion was that the Lamper Family Carnival generally maintained that gun, and that something went wrong with that gun.
Ma'am, you talked a lot about the standard of magicians having to follow up with their own props, right?
Sure, magicians performing the trick should always make sure to look up the trick's history, to see how to perform that trick whenever they're doing their investigation and research for that. And then they need to make sure that they follow through with all of the steps they've been taught, double checking the gun, the props, whatever it need be.
You told us that Max Magnificent, he should have known the risks of this trick.
That's right, ma'am. The bullet catch trick goes back to the 1500s. It's one of the most infamous tricks there is. If he didn't know the dangers behind it, then he was an irresponsible magician.
You didn't do any research into if Max Magnuson actually did that research.
Ma'am, I was given the affidavits of 2 witnesses, and that's what I was able to review. Within those testimonies, they never say anything about him looking up the dangers of this trick.
You were given the affidavits of 2 witnesses. Do I have that right?
That's right, ma'am.
You
The
didn't-
prop master and the magician's assistant.
You didn't conduct any interviews with those witnesses, right?
No, I didn't find that to be necessary.
You didn't think it was necessary to ask the magician's assistant what kind of research they did into this trick?
That's right, ma'am. They were asked to include any relevant information into those written statements, so I heavily relied on those. But I didn't see the need to have any kind of interviews because of the set precautions for those affidavits.
So when you didn't see any information in that the affidavit, you just thought it wasn't necessary to follow up.
That's right, ma'am. Those are the things I was given to review.
So you thought 2 affidavits was enough to come to your conclusions today.
Yes, counselor, I did.
Let's talk about those conclusions then. Because
All right.
you've been telling us that the defendant generally took care of that gun, right?
That's right, counselor.
And you know that's not true.
That is true, ma'am. I found that the carnival generally maintains their props, including that gun.
And you know that the defendant and Mr. Maximilian, they agreed on some safety precautions before this trip, right?
That's right, as long with any carnival and magician negotiations in their contract.
Right? The defendant told Mr. Maximilian they do their best to keep him safe.
That's right.
So when the bullet catch came along, the same applied.
That's right.
Mr. Maximilian asked the defendant to buy him a new gun, right?
Something along those lines, counselors. They debated on whether they should buy a new gun, an old gun. I know that they decided on going with a used gun from a gun club.
And you reviewed Gabby Gray's affidavit, right?
That's right.
You know that Max specifically asked the defendant to purchase a brand new gun.
That's right, counselor.
Like you said, the defendant bought a used gun, right?
Yes.
And you know Max asked the defendant to purchase a safe gun, right?
Yes, counselor. There should always be a safe gun for a performance such as this one.
Of course, there should always be a safe gun for a performance like this.
That's right.
You know, the defendant bought a gun that was about to be decommissioned.
That's right, counselor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there were any problems with the gun.
And to be clear, a gun that's about to be decommissioned, it's about to be retired.
Yes, that's exactly what that means.
Right. It's about to be taken out of service completely, right?
Yes, for that gun club, they usually have a couple of different models they use. Whenever a gun starts getting a little bit older or they have a newer model they want to purchase, they decommission a gun. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that gun isn't working or anything like that, but you're right.
So the defendant purchased that gun about to be decommissioned and put it in their performer's hands.
Yes, counselor, that's exactly what they did.
And you know, Max asked for his gun to be well maintained, right?
Yes, counselor.
The defendant didn't do that either, did they?
Counselor, I found that they generally maintained that gun.
Let's talk about what you mean by generally. Because the prop manager in this case, he only cleaned the gun once before the bullet.
Twice.
Is it your testimony that he cleaned that gun twice before the bullet catch?
That's right.
And you remember reading Angel Ashworth's affidavit, right?
I did.
And you would recognize that affidavit if I were to show it to you?
I would.
You can flip to that binder.
Awesome.
Let me try to get a page number for you
Oh, thank you. I would appreciate it.
here. I know it's a long packet.
It looks like it. Do you happen to know which document back it might be?
I believe it's the second affidavit in there.
Okay, perfect. I see affidavit of Gabby Gray. It should be one more back, right?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, counselor,
No worries, take your
Angel
time.
Ashmore, right here.
All right, ma'am, could you point me out to where in this affidavit the prop master mentions cleaning the gun twice before that bullet count?
Objection, Your Honor, under Rule 4.3 as to hearsay, if I may be heard.
Briefly, counsel.
Your Honor, in order to use the witness's out-of-court statement like this one, there needs to be a direct contradiction. We don't believe there is. On line 116, the witness Angel Ashmore states that she cleans the gun on July 3rd when she first bought it. And then later on July 14th, later in the affidavit, she cleans it again. It's entirely consistent with the witness's testimony.
Overrule the objection and allow this line of questioning.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, I want to be very clear about what we're talking.
Of course.
After purchasing the gun, before the bullet catch, the prop master only mentions cleaning that gun one time.
Oh, counselor, I'm sorry, I was a little confused. I thought you meant right after purchase. So right after purchase, they cleaned that gun twice before the bullet catch trip. But you'd be correct in saying that they only cleaned it once after.
After that, they mentioned cleaning it one time.
That's right, making it a total of 2.
She says, I quickly cleaned that, right?
That's right, ma'am.
Let's talk about why you're still testifying here today.
Sure.
You're trying
Can
to
I
make
close
it,
this up?
yeah, you're good.
Perfect.
You're
I
trying
just
to make
wasn't
a
sure we
career
were
shift.
using it anymore.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
You're trying to make a career shift, right, ma'am?
I am. I used to want to be a performer like Mr. Maximilian or my first client, Mystic Hank, but I kind of realized that I wasn't good at reading people or doing sleight of hand. So I decided to move away from that and go into the consulting world instead. And there I found my niche.
Now, this is your first case testifying for the defense.
That's correct. This is one of my first cases, but I look to do other cases in the future where I use this exact same kind of testimony to look into cases.
Thank you.
Of course.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirects?
Can I ask how much time I have?
You've got 2 minutes and 1 second left to redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, opposing counsel asked you a lot about a gun that was bought and the gun being used. Is it necessary to buy a brand new gun to perform this trick safely?
No, sir. Just like a used car or used clothing, a used gun can still be used safely as long as it's working.
Then they also asked you about cleaning the gun. Did you find evidence the gun was clean?
I did. And even if a gun is cleaned perfectly, it still doesn't necessarily assure that you're going to have a safe performance.
Ma'am, did you find that the Lamper family carnival generally maintained their props?
I did. I found that the Lamper family carnival took care of those props and made sure that they were in perfect working condition for this specific performance.
Thanks, Professor.
Of
Nothing
course.
further, Your Honor.
Thank you. May your witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you, Professor. for
Of course.
testifying.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Counsel barring anything further, the judges will tally up their scores.
Yes, Your Honor.
Speak rights.